cover again, but I'm excited for today. Good to see you all. I will be running the slides. Jacob will be taking some notes for us if needed. I guess we can just keep going. Go ahead, Jacob. Why don't you kick us off?
All right, welcome everybody. Good to see you. Today we move on to our agenda. We're gonna go ahead and pick up where we left off last week after we take roll, looking through the subchapters of the arms. Really, the idea there being is we knock out sort of the small conversations so we can get back to the big conversation, which is chapter 4. So we're gonna take care of all the more ancillary things so that we can just be focused in on chapter 4, the rest of our work. Hopefully we can, again, move very effectively and efficiently like we did last week today. Depending upon where we get, we then, after Crystal's leading of looking at the chapters that aren't chapter 4, McCall, then we can get into the conversation we talked about last week around Praxis and those things within chapter 4, time depending. And we'll look at where we are and what we have to complete moving forward. So Crystal, did you want to take roll call on this slide or?
No, keep going.
Well, everybody remember our norms. We are excellent at them. I appreciate this group greatly. It's a joy to work with this group versus some other groups that I get to engage with. So everybody know that.
We will be voting today, so we need to figure our number. I don't know how many are here or if some are still coming in terms of, I guess we could figure that out. Jacob, you could figure that out maybe once I get started.
I'm happy to help with that, yes.
Great.
We have a lot of discussions outside of the meeting, as I'm sure everybody else does, and we keep getting back to sort of what can we do in chapter 57 and what can't we do, what might potentially be an overreach, and what we always go back to in terms of thinking about chapter 57 as an arm is that its purpose is to help persons obtain/apply for a license, keep/renew a license, and understand and have a process for how to advance that license. And as we have this conversation, we all want to accomplish a lot. But if this frame is helpful, and we do on our end, we think it's key to keep these bullets and points and like, this is what we have to accomplish within the chapter. There are a lot of other things that we can accomplish, and maybe there's other methods or pathways to do that. But if we don't accomplish these 3 things, then we haven't really been true to what the chapter is and haven't moved along as efficiently as we can. So we want to kind of go back and ground us in these things of attain a license, keep, renew a license, and advance a license. That's why we have to make sure chapter 57 does well.
Okay, so I will take roll now. Also, I'm getting a couple messages. If you are not able to turn your camera on, there's some glitch this week. So far, so good in terms of not having Tristan. Please welcome Virginia is here helping us out today. But if you have an issue with your camera, please just message Virginia and she can get that taken care of for you. Thank you. All right, I'll start roll. Just going down my list of participants. Val Fowler. Angela McLean.
Hello, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Diane. I see her waving her hand. Heather.
Here.
Oh no, they're changing order. Jewel.
Good afternoon.
I did Heather. McCall.
Hi there. I almost said good morning. Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Oh, goodness. Why is it changing order? Okay. It's just Sean.
I'm here.
Great. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
I think that's Sharon Carroll. Sorry, your name keeps moving around.
I know. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm here.
Okay. I don't think I missed anybody yet here. They may be coming in, but so far that is our group. Thank you. And of course we have Julie Margle here with us as well. And Eric is here. Oh, and here's Sue just joined us, I think, as well. So people are trickling in. We are going to get started though. So our deep dive status. I am an OCD organizer. So I just wanted to make it really crystal clear as to where we're going, what we're trying to get done. And this is really more or less for me in some comments. So we're definitely going to start with our subchapter 1, some of the information that we talked about last week. I definitely have some red line versions for us to look at, to discuss, hopefully at least one to vote on. And then we are going to go to subchapter 6, because I don't think we're going to need very much discussion. A lot of it came from legal, and it's just showing you what it is, making sure you're aware of it, and voting. But I don't think it'll take long. So like Jacob said earlier, we're really just trying to get through those things that we need to do, but so that we have more time for the heart of it. And then I absolutely want to get through subchapter 2 and hopeful to get to 3. So we will see. It's a big goal, but we're going to do our best. And that's basically just saying the same exact thing. So for subchapter 1, we looked at 4 different areas. And what we did was take our conversation and turn it into some wording for legal. And I guess that's where I would like to start in saying is that if you had the chance to look at those red line recommendations, those are simply a draft for us to discuss. It's not been to anyone else's eyes but yours. It is what will go to legal for them to then look at and kind of look at the wording and make those changes. So it simply was taking our conversation and putting it into words so that then that can get to legal and then come back to us. So in no way is it set in stone. It is just what's there for us to kind of base our conversation on. Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
Really, whenever you're ready for questions on that 102, I'll ask one, but I wasn't quite sure if you were ready for questions there yet.
Okay, what I was going to do is pull up that red line and then we can get to the discussion part. This was just kind of this is where we left off on this screen right now last week. So then I'm going to go to the red line and ask for questions if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Sorry. And I was gone last week. So
yeah, no worries. No worries at all. Okay. So we're going to start with, the definitions. Can I make this bigger? Can you see it okay? You could also pull it up. It's in the draft. So the first part is in 102 definitions, part B. And Julie, if there's anything you want to add to this one, feel free. Or if Sharon is your question, I guess just let us know when you have the question, which part the question relates.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, go ahead. Then go ahead.
It's right there on 2B.
Okay, go ahead.
So I guess I'm not quite sure why this isn't a definition, and maybe that's part of my question. It seems like this is more policy or rule. And I guess really when I was on the board, I kind of wondered why the 2B, the one in the black, is currently there anyway. But I can see why, 1 belongs in there because that's explaining what NCATE is and CAPE is. And the first part of B explains, that very first sentence explains what the approval or accredited is. I guess I just need some clarification about the red and even the black right behind it. Thank you.
McCall, do you want to do your question and then we can take it all? Or Julie, do you want to chime in with that? It doesn't matter to me. Go ahead, McCall.
Sure. Yeah, I had a similar concern only because what's stated here seems to be somewhat it seems to be contrary to what's in 1057-109, which is the unusual case rule. So the unusual case rule allows the Board of Public Education to make that determination. Here, it seems like it's allowing the superintendent the discretion to approve licensure. And I realize that, it includes subject to approval by the board, but I'm not entirely sure how those go together. So I was just asking for more clarification and wondering why it was in definitions when it seems pretty clear in 109.
I think really good questions, you guys. So this was a piece, and I don't know if Dan's on the line, that he was bringing up. So I want to call our attention to this B here, an educator preparation program at a regionally accredited college or university that is approved. You notice that part is in red because the way that it currently reads is an EPP at a regionally accredited college or university, or accredited by a state board of education or a state agency. Without that is approved, it's been causing some confusion that the way that it reads is that you need to have an EPP at a regionally accredited college or university that is accredited by a state board of education or a state agency, rather than the confusion of, well, it can be an EPP program that's at a regionally accredited college, or it could be a EPP program that is not at a college or university, but rather is accredited by a state board of education or state agency. Because there are EPP programs, alternative programs, if you will, that are accredited by state boards of education or state agencies that are not affiliated with a regionally accredited college. And so the way that it's reading right now, I think is causing some confusion. So we were proposing to put in that is approved, or some kind of verbiage to indicate that this is not an EPP that is approved at a college or a state board of education, but rather what we're saying is that an EPP has to have both levels of accreditation, the regionally accredited college, and the EPP program is also then that second level of accreditation by a state board of education or state agency. So just to kind of talk about that first piece. So I think, Sharon, your question is really good. Section 1, Chapter 1 is about definitions. So I think that the intention of B is to define what an EPP is. What do we consider an EPP? And then the part down here, the second part of that's in black towards the end. I'm talking a lot. I hope I'm making sense. Maybe I should pause there for a second before I go to this next piece.
You are.
So that's why that read in that first piece about the definition. Okay. Then this second piece of this definition that's currently in rule is that next part, which is the black, which is the superintendent of public instruction has discretion to deny licensure consistent with rules if the standards are not substantially equivalent to or greater than the standards required in Montana, subject to approval by BPE upon appeal of denial. So what this is saying is, okay, and I don't know, I might agree with you, Sharon, a little bit about why even originally, as it currently reads in B, why is this part here? Why is that not part of maybe the denial section? Or because what this is saying as part of the definition is how I'm interpreting it, if you will, is that it says, oh, okay, yeah, but if the superintendent decides that even if it is an EPP that has both levels of accreditation, if they feel like the standards of that school or that prep program are not equivalent to the standards required in Montana, they could appeal to the board for a denial. And so it kind of is, I agree with you. I'm wondering if even as it currently reads, that should be in this section under definitions, if rather that component needs to live in the denial stage. And I'm not quite sure, you guys, I don't have the historical perspective, if you will, to know how often has the superintendent requested that the board look at an EPP program that they feel is substandard. I don't know. And so we were thinking about there around, well, okay, what's the opposite to get a look at that, to say, well, what if they think that actually the program is greater than, and maybe it's it's a school, an EP program that's an alternative one? What if they could prove that the standards are above what the regionally accredited is? So that maybe does live in, like what you were saying, McCall, maybe more around, is that part of an unusual case and needs to be considered over there? So I've said a lot, open for questions. Love to hear your guys' processing about both kind of the definition part and then where some of this other rule really should live, shouldn't live.
Okay. And if you wouldn't mind, this is Sharon.
Go ahead, Sharon. Sorry, I was on mute.
No problem. No, I wasn't, but I just wanted to have permission to speak first. I was on the board actually when we did have one of these come through, and I won't name the state, but it was the blank State's School of Rocket Science. And it actually did come before the board, and we were tasked with determining whether that was an actual approved educator preparation program. And certain states actually approve education preparation programs in a more a very different way from how Montana does it. So Jacob had a question about, do we have that many that are approved but not accredited in states? And that's a great question. And we kind of did run into that. And then the teacher, of course, appealed to us. I can't actually recall how that ended up turning out, but I would tend to agree here. I'm not sure that this part belongs in just a definition, although folks from higher ed might be able to shed a little bit more light on this. But to me, the opposite of the stuff in the black isn't necessarily the stuff in the red, because I'm not really sure that the superintendent even wants the discretion to have to sift through whether the rules are substantially equivalent or greater or not. But Julie, maybe you could help out with that too, if is that what your office wants to do?
I don't know that that's what we want to do. I think we were struggling a little bit here with, if you will, Sharon, that point that you made, which is super critical. That is, there are EPPs out there that could be part of a regionally accredited college. However, the educator preparation program within that college is not accredited and does not lead to licensure, or it's suspended. I think there are times when that does happen. I think what we were trying to do is just do a little bit of cleanup on that language so that it didn't look like this was an or situation, but rather an and. And then the second piece around was like, we were like, okay, where, as you were saying, how often would this come up that you would even look at substandards greater than, less than, or whatever of a preparation program if it wasn't accredited? If it's not accredited, then it doesn't meet the standard, right? If it's accredited, then it should meet the standard. So maybe it needs to just be stricken altogether, that piece starting with the superintendent of public instruction. I don't know.
Go ahead, McCall.
Julie, is there another place, I was just looking for it and I'm having a hard time finding it, in 1057 that gives the superintendent the authority to deny licenses or the discretion to deny a license? I think that is there somewhere else already, and I was having a hard time finding it, but because that piece does seem like it makes sense. But the one before that, the new language, that seems to me like that is already covered in 109 with the unusual case rule. The superintendent already brings those forward to the board. That's at least my two thoughts, but your addition to the first sentence in B makes sense too. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, so McCall, looking at, and maybe, even Sharon with your perspective and knowledge of the history too. I know that at one point in time, I don't know, in order to deny a license, still the superintendent would have to come forward to the Board of Public Ed for them to consider that denial, right? And then them to make that decision. And so the superintendent does not have the discretion to deny a license currently without seeking that approval from the Board of Public Ed. So it could already be captured, right, in the denial language. So let me just find that code really quick for you. And then you guys
Just
can
to-
keep going if you want.
For clarity purposes of this discussion, that is approved. The word approved is already in the current ARM. The two words that is are not there. So we're really just talking about adding the part about the ability to approve by the superintendent.
So
Yeah, maybe.
yeah.
And this might just be a question for legal too. I don't really know if maybe we could, sidebar this and just take another look at that.
So I think,
I don't
McCall, you're
know.
bringing up, yeah, I think so too. We could, and then just double check that if it's living somewhere, is it crosswalked and covered in another location? And it doesn't really need to be in the definition section. Because it doesn't really seem to be about definition, right? This seems to be about denial or request of an unusual case, as McCall's bringing up in 57-109. But maybe that's what we should do, Sharon. Maybe we should just take that part out right now, and then just make a consideration for adding the words that is, so that it becomes more of an and than an or. And then come back on a conversation to say, do we strike this all together? Or do we be sure that these parts are considered in other locations? And if they are, based upon legal perspective, then we could just strike it out of here. So do we want to move forward with this then, in terms of the first part and then coming back to the second part, or both parts for later?
Well, I see Dan is here now, and not to put him on this on the spot right away, but Dan, we're talking about that definitions for B, and Julie brought up your situation. I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about it, or we can come back to it and give you a second to breathe if you like.
I've actually got someone here also working on my computer, so let me gather my thoughts.
Okay.
And
all right. You tell
yeah.
me when, and we can come back. I'll move on.
All right.
Okay?
Thanks.
No
Crystal,
problem.
excuse me.
Okay, so we're going to move on down. A discussion was around this. It said age 3 to grade 3, early childhood. And we looked into how it's endorsed, and the language is P-3, which is early childhood. So to keep it consistent with the endorsement, that is the recommendation. Thoughts, questions? Okay, so we're good with moving on. Next is to C48 middle grades. And this was a conversation we had to put that content specific, not specific. And I'm sure we probably have some thoughts about that one. So go ahead, Jewel.
Thank you. In looking at that, I'm just wondering, is it really necessary to serve what purpose? I think that it will create more limitations, and that's not what we're trying to do. So I guess I don't see the necessity for it, for the wording or the addition of content specific.
Okay.
Because we can go K8. And last week you brought up an issue, Crystal, about someone wanting to teach, I believe it was 9th grade math. So it got rather confusing, but this doesn't really address that issue anywhere. So I'm just not sure what the necessity for it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Angela?
Thank you. I would just echo that, really turning on that over this past week. I think our rural schools are looking for flexibility in that K8, and I think we already have something that does it. And so I would just echo Jewel's comments.
And I guess, I mean, and I agree with that also. I think this is for those that are coming from out of state that have like that middle grades license. And it's typically, when it comes to us, it is content specific, but I hear you. I mean, the K-8 covers it. It's just those that come in, and if that's what their license is, what do we do then? Do we give them the K-8? Or the 512, if it's a content, it's kind of that we're making that ultimate decision then. So that's where it gets a little blurry to me. Jewel, go ahead.
I guess, and I think that probably is an issue when you're providing, you're trying to come up with a decision as to where to license them. But because it is an out of state versus in state, I don't want it to create roadblocks or issues down the road. And so I think looking at their specific EPPs or what they are certified in, you can determine that without that language. And and I don't know if we haven't made any definitive recommendations for out of state versus in state. So I don't think we need that language in there right now.
So Jewel, I mean, I hear you guys. It's like I am torn. I agree. And then it's like when we try to go put it in practice, it gets, and you want to leave it as nimble and flexible as possible, especially as Angela is saying for the rural schools, right? So if somebody comes with like we had one yesterday I was looking at, and he had a middle school 4-8 social studies. And so we could give him the license, right? 4-8 middle grade endorsement, not identify the content specific area. Then this individual could teach middle grades 4 through 8. He could teach social studies, he could teach science, he could teach, other content area. In the middle school allows him to be a little bit more, flexible there. The part where it gets really weird is then he can't do 3rd grade or 2nd grade, and he can't do, if you will, 9th, 10th, or 11th, or 12th for social studies. He'd have to go back to school to get either the elementary to cover anything less than 4, and he'd have to go back to school to get anything to cover for social studies if it was for anything 9 through 12. So it just was a really weird thing because a lot of the schools are structured K-8, or many of the times they're structured 512. It just doesn't quite, it just really, that middle grade piece just gets a little bit weird, right? So I think by adding the word content specific, it just adds a whole nother layer. Then they can't even teach across 4th grade, for example. Well, then you're in a weird place because most likely in a 4th grade, you're going to be in a self-contained classroom where you're expected to teach all content in a 4th or 5th grade classroom, and maybe even a 6th grade classroom, right? So I agree, putting the language on there leaves it, maybe doesn't leave it as nimble as it needs to be, but it still doesn't address the weirdness around what it means for K-3 or 9 to 12, if you will. But it is what it is. It's better to go with the lesser than the more, but it's just really hard to apply, if you will, without regard to the context of probably where they're teaching. But anyhow, those are my thoughts.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, and I agree with Jewel and Julie and everybody that's really spoken so far, as far as I understand, being pulling content specific off there and being more flexible seems to make sense to me from the position I'm in. It seems like you're gonna, regardless, in this particular category, you're gonna have some weirdness regardless. So making at least one end of it, one part of it more flexible rather than less makes sense to me. So I just wanted to speak to that as I understood that at this point in time. Any questions? That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
okay. Okay.
Thank you. Jewel?
Yes, and thank you, Sean, for your comments too. I do think it goes back to the local control issue as to what they have applied for within the district and where they are needed. And mostly that will be some of the rural schools. Otherwise, they will be placed in specific content area positions. But having more flexibility depending on where the district needs them is very important. So that nimbleness is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. Sharon?
Yeah, and I guess, Joel, I understand where you're coming from there, and I guess I'm not sure I'm taking an adversarial stance or if I'm agreeing with you. So I just want to clarify though, but I would hope, I guess, that a school district would not assign a teacher whose educator preparation program has really been specific to social studies, that they wouldn't assign them in the name of nimbleness to an area that they're not qualified for or took no training in at all. Like, let's just say, ninth grade math for, or even high school government. I mean, I understand a district needing to be nimble, and I would hope at the local level that they wouldn't assign them to teach in a place that they're not qualified for. That's it.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put my hand down the first time, but I would just speak to that and say that I would be disappointed if my administration did that. And so if they're 4th through 8th middle grades endorsed, they wouldn't be sitting out there at the high school anyway, or the third grade or whatever. So no, I would expect more of my administration, and if that didn't happen, then we'd probably have a conversation. So I just wanted to share. I think that this is the way the licensure reads, and that's the licensure we follow.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Erica, go ahead.
And maybe this is beating a dead horse, but I have a good example of what I think the nimbleness that Jewel is referring to right now. I hired an ag teacher from out of state who has a doctorate and has substantial background and has taken a lot of classes in science. And so I think that nimbleness, I have him teaching ag classes and then just 2 science classes also. So I think that's kind of what Jewel was talking. I would never have him teach a math class, which he's not strong in and has nothing in background in, or an English class. But something that he has actually background and can prove, through classes or something else. I'm thinking is what Jewel is referring to.
Great. Thank you. And Erica, I did see your email and I will get to you.
Thank you, Crystal.
Yes.
I figured you would put that together. Thank you.
I did indeed. Thank you. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, and I guess I would speak to that too, in part because we ran across this a lot.
Oh, I think you're cutting out, Sharon. Oh. Did we lose you, Sharon?
Yeah, you did. Sorry, I'm back though.
Okay,
Can you
great.
hear me
Yep.
now?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Technically, an ag teacher's licensed to teach agriculture, though, is not licensed to teach science. So that would be a ding on the science courses, probably. But I would say too, though, that what's happened, we want to just make the licensure rules reflect, if we license them in a certain area, that way superintendents know, oh, they're licensed here, so they must be qualified here. I think that's really the overarching reason for the rules. Probably, right?
Yes, I see lots of head shaking. Erica, did you have something else to follow up?
Nope, just forgot to take my hand down, sorry.
Okay, you were next. All right, Dan, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I just wanted to address this here. Rural Montana, okay? Besides going through all the other rigmaroles now of bringing in an international teacher and then not actually having them licensed at all in the state of Montana for a period of months. If the only science I can offer is through ag science, why wouldn't I do that? If I'm in an agricultural based community, I'm just, why would we want to limit small rural schools? Think about something as small as Judith Gap. Why are we saying that an ag science degree or a teacher with an ag science license endorsement, maybe they've had part of their case coursework as well? Why would we want to limit what that small school can do within the licensure piece? That's my question.
Sean?
Yeah, pardon my naivety, perhaps. Would this be, with the example that Dan's bringing up, would that be more of a situation where you would have perhaps a probationary licensure rather than class 1 or 2, for instance? I mean, some other kind of situation that will go ahead
Oh, we lost your sound, Sean.
Can I ask a question real quick before we go on, Crystal?
Yeah.
What it seems like the only time this would be an issue would be if someone wanted a 4th grade content specific license. Like otherwise, why wouldn't they just be covered under the 512 license endorsement?
Because they come in with a 4.8 license in science, say. So technically that 5, 6, 7, 8 is covered, but to give them the 512, you're then saying that they are prepared to teach the upper high school grades.
So I agree with Jacob. If they've got the specific content area, why would we not? If they can teach middle school, they should be prepared in that specific content to teach 9 through 12. Just flexibility.
So what I'm hearing is that we take out the content specific for the middle grades, leave that as it was. And then if someone comes in, say with a 4.8 social studies, they get the 512. But what about that 4th grade? And we're spending time on something that may happen once in my existence at the OPI. So maybe it's something to move on from. And hey, that could maybe be an unusual case because it could be once in a blue moon. But that's really where it was coming from. But as I'm looking at our time and, yes, another rich conversation, I'm not sure we should focus on the what ifs and kind of get to the things that we know need change. So if you're okay with it, I took that language out for the middle grades. I took out the content specific and I'd like for us to move on if that's okay. Because as I hear myself saying hypotheticals, that's not a really good place for us to be, right? So moving on to the regionally accredited, it was brought to our attention we needed to add G, Higher Learning Commission, as an accredited, regionally accredited, I guess. Is that, Julie, is that how it's stated? Yeah, I mean, that's how we got it, right?
It's one of the associations that accredits universities and colleges across the country. Yep.
I'm sorry, Crystal, I just want to acknowledge Sean's hand. He had cut out when he was commenting. I don't know if.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Sean,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it was just part of the conversation, and I apologize. I saw this Zoom error message just as I finished speaking, and I wasn't even looking at the screen. I was looking out the window. So I just wanted to verbally say my apologies.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. And Jacob jumped in and kind of kept it moving. So thank you. Okay, so moving on from that was the exchange teacher we thought needed the actual definition within definitions. So what we did was put exchange teacher and the definition that comes from right in 1057-112. So we took it out of there and then put it where the definitions are, since it is the definition of what an exchange teacher is. Sorry. And then just made a class 5 license to be the only part under that 112. Any discussion on that? Go ahead, Diane. You're muted.
I'm back on the other topic. I'll just write it in the chat because I'm not familiar with the Higher Learning Commission, and I just want to know a little bit more about that organization.
And I don't either. So Julie, do you know any more than that, or Angela?
Thanks, Diane. I took a look at a map today of a regional accreditation, and one of the a big chunk of the middle part of our country was covered with Higher Learning Commission accreditation. And I visited with colleagues here in the office and a colleague on one of our campus EPPs. And it sounds like that's just, another accrediting body like NWCC, and we're good to go with it.
Okay, thank you. I just want to check with our higher ed folks. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Angela, thank you so much for doing your homework on it after seeing it added there. That's really helpful since I've not heard of it clearly. Thank you. So back to, and sorry, Diane, that I kind of jumped ahead without you being able to say that. The adding the exchange teacher as a definition and striking it from 112. Any comments, concerns? And then the last section is the emergency authorization of employment. So I'm sure we'll have a good discussion around this. Let's see if I can make it even a little bigger. Nope, too big.
Will we have to change the title of 112?
License of exchange teachers.
Since we're not necessarily talking about exchange teachers anymore, right? Or is it still going to be specific to exchange program?
It's still specific to exchange teachers.
Okay.
Exchange teachers. What I'm thinking is actually what we talked about is that whole international teacher piece will be under class 4s and we need to add something there since they are licensed that way. So it's
With the J1 visa?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so taking a look at what was added to emergency authorization. I have to reread what we put. The state will issue an emergency authorization. So we added that they may not exceed a total of 3 school years, regardless of what district, what school, what content area or position. And we actually had a really long conversation about this. We truthfully do get, and this is what I said last week, the repeat offenders, lack of better words. Every year, a district applies for an emergency authorization for the same position, the same person, and yes, verify that they have posted the position and it's not getting, filled. They're doing all the right steps. But to me, that then, and if this person is interested year in and year out, let's look at another way for them to be in that role and not make it an emergency authorization. Could they go, take coursework? Could they, if they're that interested? I mean, I just did one yesterday that it was her 5th emergency authorization for the same exact position. And as much as obviously the district wants that person in that role, I feel that that's not really the use for an emergency, and that they could be looking at different ways to get that teacher in that role, a different pathway. So that's why, and to keep it consistent with, most conversations, we said the 3-year. I looked through as many as I could. Our biggest ones were the one I did yesterday, 5 was the most. We have some 4s, and a lot of 3 years and 3 years. So love to hear your thoughts on that before we move forward. Angela, go ahead.
Crystal, I am really excited to hear that logic that you just put forth. I think there's great power and great opportunities for us in that. I think that we could add language to the effect that to that nature, to this here. I don't know what it would look like, but I think we have some districts who might be engaging an individual for these emergency authorizations who might be sitting on a bachelor's in something entirely different than education. And we have a master's of arts in education for that, where they can get that in 1 year where they live, from where they live. And so what I think you present, Crystal, is really, truly, I think, a grow your own model. They have somebody who is meeting their need there. And if we could add language here that they would be able to engage that same person in meeting that need for up to 3 years, so long as that person is on a path towards completion of an ed prep program, that would eventually lead to licensure in that area. I think there's power in that, not only for 57 going forward, but I think for the districts. I think there's real power there. So we have some infrastructure already in place to help them deliver that.
Thank you. Jewel?
While I agree with some of what Angela just said, in your rural districts, even if an individual comes with a bachelor's degree, there are some of them that, for whatever reason, do not want to pay more for courses to get that master's degree, or for time constraints choose not to, but the district still has a void, so they fill that void. And based upon many contracts, the district cannot pay or help with assisting in getting that master's degree. There are some issues in rural districts that make that difficult. But beyond that, let me, because I had a discussion within the office that this language contradicts statute. So there's difficulty with that. So there should, so just legally, and I don't want to get into that. I think that we need, I can't give legal advice, but I think we need to look at that language and how there is a conflict with adding 3 years as a limit for that.
Okay. Angela?
So I think I really appreciate the good conversation around this, and I would just go back to the notion that I think that there are opportunities here, and whether the individual would pay for the credits or whether the campus, the school district would, is an entirely different conversation, perhaps out of Chapter 57. But I just think that we're presented here with some opportunities. And certainly, as Jewel suggests, I would point to any statutes and make sure that what we're about to do here or consider would comport with existing statutes. But I think that we do need to consider an opportunity for a district to mitigate their own needs, not just for a year, not just 1 year at a time, going back to you for an emergency authorization. But really, I think there's an opportunity for them to mitigate it for more than a year at a time, and maybe for longer than even the 3 years, by supporting the person that they already have there in the role towards the appropriate licensure. Otherwise, are we going to see an end to these growing numbers? Are we going to see these numbers of emergency authorizations on the decline anytime soon? I just think that we put it in the trustees' hands to figure out how they can support these teachers to a better place with licensure as they're engaging them in the classroom and using them in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Hi, John.
Hi, just real quick, because we have the class 5 and BPE processes already going. We do hear from individuals from time to time that are coming into those existing structures. And I think this emergency authorization would be similar, where they're truly just feeling a need. They don't want to become the teacher. They're not looking to be the teacher. And so, I think that's where there's a little bit of rub here, is sometimes people are really just trying to help the district provide services and provide an education to kids who really don't want to be the teacher. And so I'm supportive of the 3-year rule, because at some point it's no longer an emergency authorization. It's someone teaching without a license. But I do want to really stress that there are folks out there that will continue to use this, who are really trying just to help the district offer programming to kids. And sometimes it's in order to not have to cut a music program or not have to cut a health enhancement program. So having a role for those folks. And then I do want to support what Angela's talking about, of using this as an opportunity to really develop some grow your own, provide opportunities to where people are. And, I think I've said this a couple of different times, while it's not specifically a Chapter 57 issue, I do think looking at ways to encourage campuses to innovate with online programming and bring the programming out to people where they are would be a good use of some resources.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna leave it there for now, Jewel, but I definitely, the next step would be to take it to legal. And I have written a note to myself to go over that language with statute just to see, and I will come back with some information next week if that's okay. And then I'm noticing, oh, here. My 3 went up there, that's why I was confused. Number 4, we added the language around not issuing an emergency authorization for special education positions based on statute. So that was something that, I get that question very often. It is one of the highest needed areas, special education in our state. I even brought it to licensure committee to ask, can we change that? Can we get, and legal looked at it and said, absolutely not. Special education cannot have an emergency authorization because of the IDEA statute. So I wanted to make that clear and make sure that it was in our arm, just because it isn't right now. And it's important for not just me to be able to say that to districts, but for it to be there, obviously. Any questions about that? That's a pretty cut and dry one. Go ahead, Jewel.
Here we go again. Because we've been having some internal conversations about this, and the wording, according to internal conversations, 300.156 is not a statute. It is an administrative regulation, and the terminology suggestion is to broaden that by saying emergency authorization of employment for special education teachers is prohibited under federal regulations and is unavailable to a district for such positions, which makes it broader in case something is changed. down the road with federal guidelines, but again, it's an administrative regulation. And also McCall asked me a question, and I will find that statute for her and get that out. So
Great.
thanks.
Jewel, would you send me that language or even put it in the chat? I think
I
it's
will.
great,
I-
and I will change that because I agree. If
I
you don't
will-
mind,
Nope, I will put it in the chat.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so there's a lot going on in the chat. I have not seen. Jacob, is there anything we need to go back on? One.
Not that I think wasn't discussed in the conversation. I think we're good.
Okay. So then I would like to quickly go back. I think Dan is ready to that part B where we started our conversation. And Dan, to get us to, I'll tell you kind of where we were with it. We talked about your example, and what we did to make it clear is to add the very simple, though, 2 words, that is approved. Changes what it says, but it also then makes it very clear as to what it says. So if you'd like to speak on it, or if not, that's up to you, but I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just reading that very quickly. So an educator preparation program at a regionally accredited college or university that is approved or accredited by a state board of education or state agency. That means they would qualify then from an accredited program. Correct?
Yes, an accredited college or university that is approved or accredited by a state board of education or state agency. It's not an or.
Right. Well, okay. But it does fix the problem. I mean, and then the red lettering in the yellow would replace the black lettering in the yellow?
No, so it was in addition.
Oh, just addition, okay.
Yep, so, but we've also discussed that it's not really a definition, and this is the definition section.
Right.
So we're thinking to strike it all together and see if it goes within where unusual cases are, where denials are. So that's why it's yellow, because we're thinking that it doesn't live here altogether. The black was already there. The red was just the addition. So we need to move it, is what we were thinking.
Okay, yeah. And I think what's been the problem is that we've had this idea that alternative pathways to licensure in other states somehow fall short, and that some other state accrediting body, their definitions of a teacher would somehow be different from the state of Montana. And so that's what we faced with teachers, especially coming out of Texas, who've been able to do regional programs, which are state accredited by TEA. And I think that language fixes that. So, and if you take out the rust and yellow, sure. Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we could have more discussion on that alternative path once we get into our subchapter 4. I'd love for you to continue that conversation then. But if you're okay moving forward with this, I think we're ready to.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so that covers everything on this revision slide. We had one that McCall and I worked on, let me get to it. $109, I think, right, McCall?
Yep, 109.
Can we see 109? Sorry, my computer's been so slow this week. So what we did, this is the unusual cases, and we talked about how we need to give the person the right to waive their 30-day notice if they want to have their case go before the Board of Public Ed, and it's not been the 30 days. And what I've been referencing is what is in the denial section. And that just didn't align because clearly it's for an unusual case and not a denial. So we added the language, similar language that fit under this section. And I think that's really it. It was just making sure that it was clear that then I can, we can reference when a person comes up for an unusual case, 1057-109 instead of the denial section. Sharon?
Yeah, and I would just concur with this language. When I was chair, we didn't have enough language to help support this, and that actually 2 and 3 had become what we did for a procedure at that time, and this certainly has to help both the Board of Public Ed itself and the applicant. So this language looks great.
Thank you. McCall, go ahead.
Thanks, Crystal. Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is currently what we're doing. And like Crystal said, we just took it from the notice of hearing section in 1057-602, and then made it relevant to the unusual cases piece rather than disciplinary or denial of licenses. Now this at least just helps the board better understand how we're supposed to act and follow through on one of these requests when it comes to us from the superintendent. So it should be pretty easy and straightforward.
I'd love to suggest a vote. Sharon, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries.
I was going to say, yeah, let's vote.
Okay. Woo.
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
vote.
Jacob, you want to take it away with the voting?
Certainly. Any final comments? Is anybody opposed to the change? Nobody's opposed. Everybody said aye. I think we can move on, Crystal.
All right. I see heads nodding and thumbs up and smiles. So yes. All right. Thank you. Okay. So let me pull up the everyone a second to breathe. So we're moving on to subchapter 6, Educator, Licensure, Disciplinary Procedures. So there were 3 sections that we looked at. One was from the 601A, was from our legal team here, or legal people, not just the team, but the people that have worked with it here that are from our office and not. And then 2 of them were from all of you when I looked through our the feedback that you gave, and it made total sense. So I wanted to make sure to honor that and put that here as well. So I guess I really didn't need to go with that. What I'd like to pull up is the red line for 600. Did it flip over? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. I was able to definitely, I talked with our chief legal counsel on this part, that's stricken here. And I got clarification that that was the part that should be in terms of the dangerous drugs. And this came about with the passing of legalized marijuana. So the language did not make sense anymore. With that, this right here, the statute. So that's why, oh, I'm sorry, this one. Oh, shoot, what did I do? The 45.9.102 did not make sense anymore. That's really all I know about it. I am not a lawyer. I trust Jake and had him look at it with me. So we can talk about it, but I really don't have anything else to offer on it because yeah, that's where I am with it. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah. Hey, I don't have anything to add either, except thank you very much. I've got to go. I got to get to class here in a minute. I won't be able to attend next week. I already have a meeting set up. I just wanted to say bye and thank you very much for all the stuff that you put out there on the site. We'll see you
No
Take it
problem.
easy.
I'm so glad you were able to be here a little longer today. Nice.
Well, thank you for considering the change in meeting time to give me a little more time. I really appreciate it. And good luck to you for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. No, we love your input. Thanks, Sean. Go ahead, John.
You might not know the answer to this question, but we have, as you can probably imagine, some students over time who have run afoul of this language, as it were. If someone were denied a license because of a marijuana conviction, with the changes in the rule, does that change their eligibility for licensure? Where what I'm getting at is if someone were to come to me and say, hey, I graduated 10 years ago and I didn't get a license because I had whatever problem, could I reapply for licensure now that the law has changed? Would we tell them yes, or would we tell them because it happened at that time and it fell under that? Or would we tell them just contact you and have you take a look at it? I want to just make sure we give people the right advice.
I think that's a great question. I don't have an answer. I'd say they definitely contact me, and we would look into it at licensure committee and, have the legal lens on it. Julie, do you have anything else? No? Okay. Yeah, I'd say just direct it to me, and we will take it, further to who needs to see it at that point, I think would be a good pathway. Okay, then the next one was to clarify, and Sharon, I know this was yours, not to put you on the spot, but I just want to be sure that I captured it correctly, that it used to state, and I should have left the language, it just said if the board, and I agree, we need to make sure it's clear that we're speaking of the Board of Public Ed and not like a school board or, that. So if you could look at that, Sharon, especially just because it did come from you, and make sure that I did put it the right way.
That's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
Yeah. No,
and thanks for catching that.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I'm going to strike that for whatever reason. I can't do it in Google, but just so that I had the word.
It just differentiates that from local district or local school board. So, and I think that's an important, especially right here. That's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, I think, McCall, we just needed to change the language that we're now allowed to have the written notice of appeal be emailed. So we just needed to change the language there. Anything else on that?
No, we just have gotten so many questions from people about why they can't email us their letter in response to something we're sending them. Seems pretty crazy to us. So we just thought, as long as they still are putting together a written notice for their appeal, that they should be able to either send that by mail or through email. It makes no difference to us.
Great. Thank you. And that is it for subchapter 6. So if I don't hear anyone oppose, I will definitely, the next step is just to give it to legal. So they'll look at it again, look over. I mean, I truly don't think there's anything that needs their attention, but that's the process. So if anyone is opposed, please speak now. If not, I plan to make sure Jake gets this one today. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's in here. Is 1057-601 is in this spot, isn't it?
Yep. Oh, 601A.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. I can try to pull it up.
Aaron, are you looking for, definition of immoral conduct?
No, I'm looking for 1067 or 1057-601 2B.
Request for discipline against the license of a educator or specialist preliminary action.
Right, and I apologize because I missed the meeting last week, so maybe this was already discussed. My apologies.
So did you say B? Is that what you
yes,
said?
B is in boy.
B is in boy. Okay.
Yeah.
So 1B?
2B.
Okay, we have just a 2 and then we have a 3B.
Oh, shoot. Okay, something says that in order to receive a license, some sort of reprimand or a discipline issue, that it could come from the superintendent of public instruction, the superintendent or the school board locally, or from any other credible source.
Oh, I know where you are.
Yep,
Okay.
so that's 1057-601, 1A and B.
And the credible
so what
source
I think-
language is
Okay.
in 2. 2 says a credible source in the last line.
So Sharon, what you're alluding to, and we actually
Yeah.
have one of these right now, McCall. So someone can come to, the superintendent can appeal to the Board of Education for a denial or some kind of action on someone's license. But also a school district or like a board chair can directly come to the Board of Public Education as well, and not through the OPI. And we currently have one of those where they came straight from the board, the local
Okay.
board, if you will, to the Board of Public Education seeking suspension of someone's license, if you will.
Okay.
So what were you thinking
But I
about
think
that,
it
Sharon?
also allows well, I think any other credible source has some trouble.
Mm,
You know, who is from a local school district board of trustees or from any other credible source. And of course, it looks like that, or the superintendent may initiate a request from a local district board of trustees or from any other credible source, which does, it's skipping. I know, I saw one of these. It skips the local board of trustees and allows some other quote unquote credible source to, I guess, speak directly to the superintendent. And I just don't know that we want a rule that has credible. I think if I were the superintendent of public instruction, I wouldn't know who that was.
Jewel?
I guess my suggestion is we take a look and maybe, yeah, go ahead.
I wholeheartedly agree based upon past experience where it was, so I'll try to say this correctly. Given directly as a credible source, and how that can be determined is very questionable. And so I agree with Sharon, trying to weigh who is and who isn't a credible source is very difficult. So we could maybe end it with school district board of trustees.
Right. And if that other credible source wants to talk to their local school board, that's how they're going to communicate with the superintendent of public instruction. I feel like sometimes that credible source has been a quote unquote concerned citizen. And I think when then they're allowed to sort of talk about an applicant or a licensee or about a local school board, I think that just has a lot of, and we have a rule that lets that happen. I feel like that's not conducive to quality educator.
Go ahead, Diane.
I'm just going to concur with that. It is that working on a credible source when we already have a venue for looking into those cases. I would like that not to be there.
And it's interesting as well, you guys, look how 3 reads then. So then it moves into 3, request for discipline shall specify whether a letter of reprimand, revocation, or suspension is sought, and shall include the charges the subsection under which charge is brought, an outline of the facts and evidence related to the charges, and if the request is made by a board of trustees, a copy of the minutes documenting the decision to request disciplinary action. So then the question becomes, if it's a concerned public entity, are they going to be able to provide that information? Or is it just going to be, what information are they going to have? How would they know if you're outside the system, if there were disciplinary actions taken? I don't know. Because this A, B, C, and D doesn't say A or B, or it says and, basically. I don't know. I don't know if those two are in alignment with any other credible source. That's all.
And I see Dan said he reads that as the county superintendent. Should we add that and take out other credible source? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, just, a credible source, I guess, when I look at the way the system is structured, if it's not the Board of Education, the only other source for me would be the county superintendent of schools. And that's why, that's just how I would read that. I mean, look, maybe that's just an interpretation from a superintendent, because, when any kind of appeal happens, if it fails at the board and wants to be appealed, the next step would be the county superintendent. So that's why I would read it. The only other credible source would be a county suit. But I could be way off.
That sounds like a good addition.
How's that?
Are all superintendents county superintendents in Montana?
No.
Yes, so wouldn't
No.
just local superintendent be? better
Well,
name?
that's why I suggested and put school administrator, because it could be your local superintendent, it could be your county.
Local school
superintendent.
district, board of trustees.
So I think it could
School
be a lot of
administrator.
things.
And
Would you want a
actually, I
school
think even
administrator?
for a local board,
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Sharon.
Sharon.
well, I think the catch here is, in your local district, do you want your how do you want your superintendent to be reporting these things? Do you want that to be reported from a local school district board of trustees? Yes, they answer to you, but are you giving more information in a public meeting than you need to be? I mean, that certainly bears looking at.
Krista, I think Joel has her hand up too.
Okay, go ahead, Joel.
Trying to multitask and put the other in the chat. Okay. I just want to say that in Montana, and in response to Jacob's question, not all county superintendents have education degrees. Some of them are like clerk of courts, or it's an additional responsibility. So just putting administrator might not cover county superintendents. So that's for clarification.
Dan?
Right, and I agree with Jewel there. I mean, there's plenty of clerks that are school superintendents for the county as well. But having school administrator there, that is, to me, another, that would be kind of a sticky spot to be in. I mean, I kind of like, really, if we're going to do anything, I mean, I really just like the language previously. when it was just county superintendent or the board of trustees. Because I mean, there's two elected bodies there, you know, one being just a person in an office, the other one board of trustees. And the board through their clerk of the district would probably be making that report against a superintendent. But a school superintendent would do it for everyone else in the district. But I think giving any school administrator, let's just say a K-8 building principal, that ability to do it, maybe opening up doors that we don't want opened.
And Dan, it may be the superintendent or the principal who is the individual. Not to say, you know, I know our administrators are perfect.
Right. Right.
But if it's about them and their license, that gets a little weird too. So
Right.
I just wanted to add that piece and say I agree with you, sir.
Yeah.
So do we like how that looks? The yellow means it's being taken off. I don't know how to strike in Google. If anyone knows how, please tell me. I will do that though. Okay. Well, I feel like we got through a lot, not as far as, of course, I wanted, but you know, I feel good about it. We have 8 minutes left. Julie, did you want to go into that data today, or do you want to save that?
I just want to make a mention it, if you don't mind, really quick. And then I know that Jacob had a piece that we also included in the data file research, but you guys, I did include in the data tab on your Google site some data in 4 different buckets. One was emergency authorization, one was under some Praxis data, one was under like some kind of things that related to recruitment and retention kind of datas. And then another that was just kind of all about the processing of licenses and some of the rules and just a variety of data in there. And so just want it to be there for you guys to be able to peruse and be able to look at that, to help as you're looking through things, to help inform you, you know, from multiple perspectives. But also wanted to give Jacob a minute to talk about some of the research that he gathered about Praxis overall. That's also in there that he can point to you. So it is under the Praxis data. So it is the, I'm sorry. So it's the Word document that's in there called Praxis and Teacher Quality. So you want to pull that up, and Jacob, do you want to share what's in here for the group?
I will. So we did a semi-rigorous search of the literature on Praxis and teacher quality to see what was out there. So what's in this document is a series of citations and their abstracts related to the research that's looked into that correlation. There's some highlighted key phrases done by me, so nothing scientific about what's highlighted, just pulling out what I thought sort of spoke to the main point in many of the abstracts. What I can tell you in general is that at best, the evidence is mixed as to the relationship. In our search, there's evidence on both sides, and that it is a correlation to teacher effectiveness / quality, and it's not. It does seem to be stronger in the STEM fields, that if you demonstrate strong content knowledge on your Praxis content assessment in STEM content areas, then typically your students will demonstrate better outcomes. It's less strong than outside of those fields. In the largest study, which was a synthesis of all studies, it again found sort of mixed evidence, but it did find that GPA and the number of courses in your content area. So if you're a specific content area teachers and you did better and took more courses in that content, then you're a more effective teacher. Seems intuitive, right? And then if you think about it from, again, sort of a intuitive way, the GPA also is a demonstration of some level of competency in terms of getting to class on time, doing your work on time, doing the tasks that are asked of you, which oftentimes does correlate as well to effective teaching, just because you're organized and you get the things done that you need to do. So mixed, nothing strong to say one way or the other, but this gives you something to dig deeper into as we engage in that conversation. And we just have 4 minutes, so I don't know that we want to ask anything else. Jewel does have her hand up though, so Jewel.
Sure, great.
I was just trying to go back through the document. One of the things that stood out to me is it has that the Praxis, there is protection at the pre-service level to safeguard the public from incompetent teaching. So I thought that was very interesting. And so that was in there as well.
Yeah, and Jacob, what you're saying about some of the research too that you just shared, when you look at that slide, Crystal, right before, and you look at the pass rates from the last year of any Praxis score that's been submitted to the OPI for consideration for licensure. So this would include candidates that did attend programs here in our state, but also those that attended programs outside of our state. So anybody who submitted Praxis scores. It's interesting that you say that about math and science. Those are the areas where the pass rates are lower. So there's a higher bar, if you will, in science and math on the pass score, if you will, in Praxis to be able to pass the test in that. So it's a very interesting that you say that. So that's all I wanted to add to that. Crystal, you can go to your closing. Thanks.
Yeah, I real quick though, I don't know that we can make the statement that there's a higher bar. There's certainly we can say that there's a lower pass rate, but to judge the bar of what it takes to pass the assessment, I don't think we can make that statement.
Okay, so we didn't get to 2 or 3. However, I think 4 is so important that we will go there next week. And then hopefully come back to 2 and 3. We did add next week's meeting. I know, McCall, that doesn't work for you, but we feel that we need more time, and chapter 58 is meeting next week. So we will be here if you're available. I know it's kind of a last minute addition, but we've just felt that we needed more time. So we will add that in. Homework is, if you haven't had a chance to look over subchapter 4, come with anything and all that you want to discuss, what we want to change. I hope to have it in a similar format as this, the past 2 meetings. I think that it's working and flowing for us. And having that red line, if we have anything that we want to just propose and then discuss and edit as we go through, I just think it's really clear and within our discussion. So any objections to that, please let me know. You can email me, but I think that that's the path we're going to take. Yeah, so we added next week's meeting, and yeah, we're going to try to finalize by the 30th so that we can have things ready for suspect on October 14th. I will submit anything we voted on to legal this week and hopefully have that back to us next week if there's any additions or corrections that they added so that you can see that. And again, I am the contact for now. We have Virginia as well, but she's done a wonderful job. Thank you, Virginia, for being here. But if you have questions, concerns, not being able to access something, I'm new to that Google site, but Virginia helped me out. So I now know I have to give access if I add things. So I'm apologize to Jewel and those that I didn't do that right away. So that's all I have. It is exactly 2:30. Look at that. Thank you so much. Great conversation. I feel like we're getting somewhere and making some great changes and helps our licensure world here in Montana. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Virginia, do we get the chat? We do get the chat when we save it, correct? Because there are
Yes.
some things that I need from that. Okay.
Yeah, and I pulled what Jewel had sent, but yes, we will get the chat. And I don't know if there's a debrief meeting for this or just go ahead and get the notes together, the meeting minutes together.
You're fine, Diane. Nothing private. Don't worry.
Diane's raising her hand. She's like, oh, Virginia, I'll help you write the notes.
You're good.
So Virginia, we will follow up and then, yeah, what you want to start doing is getting it set because we've got to get the recording, if you will, ready to go. Hopefully you stopped recording.